Well, welcome. I'm Dennis McCuistion, and this is the third and last part of a series with former Congressman and House Majority Leader Dick Armey. Our focus will be on why he left and why lessons learned and his thoughts on the future of the American political system. Now, before we start, Dick, welcome to the program.
Yeah.
Thank you. And you've written several books, including the one called Leader, which I have here, and it's really your autobiography. And in the first couple of segments, we've covered a lot of your history, and for that viewer who didn't see the first two, and you can see them online, you grew up in the small town of Cando, North Dakota, Cando. You went to college because it was too dang cold on the wire. You became an economist and then got a Ph.D. at the University of Oklahoma, taught at University of North Texas. Based on that, you decided to run for Congress in 1984. You were elected in 84 as a Republican. You spent 10 years in Congress before the Republicans took over from 35 years of Democratic control. You became House Majority Leader, which is the number 2 post in Congress in 1994, actually in 1995 when it started. And so you're a House Majority Leader. That's what we talked on too. Now, then you came to a point just before you left, but you wrote a very, I'm not sure you wrote it, but maybe you just extemporaneously gave your resignation speech. Talk to us about that.
Well, of course, when you retire from a great privileged career or a chance to serve in a way that you never dreamed you would be able to, there was a lot of nostalgia, a lot of sentiment there, but it was time for me to move on, and especially the circumstances were bad. We had a speaker that believed he was nothing but a speaker for his president, which is, of course, absolutely wrong. He's elected in the House. And we had a president that, quite frankly, did not stand up to the kind of things I believe free market, small government conservatives did. And but I think the real linchpin that caused me to go was the speaker was defaulting on running the House in an orderly, predictable, reliable fashion, and basically rerolling what the White House wanted to. And I thought my final decision was inspired by, of all people, John Denver. I was feeling remorse for a bad vote I made, and I was listening to a Denver song, Some Days Are Diamonds, Some Days Are Stones, and I heard him say, the face that I see in the mirror, not more and more is a stranger to me. More and more I believe there's a danger of becoming what I never thought I'd be. And I had made a personal commitment that I'd never change who I am to keep or hold a job. So it's time to go.
I suspect that decision you're talking about was one that had to do with the war in Iraq. You were asked to go to Camp David while you were still in Congress before you left, of course, and you were briefed, I guess, by Dick Cheney and others. What did they tell you, and how did that influence your vote?
Well, that was actually two different things.
Okay.
Dick Cheney gave me a private, personal briefing. I should have asked why. In my mind, I didn't. I accepted it. He flagrantly lied to me about it, misrepresented the threat to this country, and in a frightening way. We went to Camp David. I should have asked why. I'd been in Congress a long time. Nobody had ever invited me to Camp David before. And the President Bush put on a dog and pony show, and I should have seen more clearly that it was phony as could be. And the fact of the matter is, they lied about that. And they got us in a wholly unnecessary war. And it breaks my heart, and I fess it right up in the book. I gave the most miserable speech I ever gave in Congress. And I cast the worst vote I ever cast in Congress because I felt that the man's the vice president of the United States. He's of my own party. And he knows more about these sorts of things than I do by virtue of previous positions. I have to take him at his word. I should never have done so. I think he lied, quite frankly, the vice president. I think he lied to President Bush, too. But I believe President Bush's reason for needing that war with Iraq was more personal than having to do with the nation. I don't want to get into my belief here because I can't prove it, but I can prove Cheney lied.
Yeah. Well, so that was the end, so to speak, and the beginning of everything else. But one of the things that your colleagues in the House did, very unusual thing, is they gave you, first of all, they did a portrait of you, which is on the cover of the book Leader, which is a great portrait. And then they named a room after you, I think, H236. Talk to us about that, the Richard K. Armey room.
Well, that was you have to understand, years and years ago, Speaker Rayburn made a deal that the one suite of office would always be Republican. And since I was a majority leader, they selected a room in that office. No speaker since Rayburn had ever gone back on that Rayburn commitment. It's called respect. Nancy Pelosi did. So after they had the ceremony and they took my portrait and they hung it on the wall, and I thought, well, now I'm there. I'm going to be part of this building forever. She gets elected speaker. She chooses that suite of office. She takes my portrait down. And so not only was I the first majority leader in the history of the House, and the only one, to have his portrait hung in the Capitol, I'm the only one that ever had his portrait taken down. Twice. Boehner finally put it up just before he left as speaker, and then she took over the majority and took it down again. I don't know where it is now. I'd like to believe it's in that room, but
who knows? Well, speaking of Speaker Pelosi, one of the things that viewer will never forget who follows politics at all is when Obamacare was passed. This was after you were out, of course, but I'm going to ask you about it in this way because, in the old days, I could read a law that was passed. It was maybe 8 pages, maybe 10, 14 pages. Obamacare was passed in 2010, I believe, and I think it was close to 2,000 pages, if I'm not mistaken. And she famously said on TV, so I'm not making this up, she famously said, let's pass the law and then we'll read it and see what's in it.
Yeah, that was really not a very bright thing to have said. The reason being, the committee reported the bill before the August recess. Once the committee reports the bill becomes available for the public to read. So she makes this comment, we got to pass a bill so we can read it. And there are people all over this country. My friend Bill Detweiler read the entire bill before I got back from Washington. He had read it. And there are people all over this country that were reading that bill. And then the Democrats had their August town hall meetings, and they would go to the town hall meeting, 2 or 3 or 4 people would stop asking questions about that bill. And Lord have mercy, they'd say, well, I haven't read it yet. Now you're sitting there with a whole room full of people saying, this guy who's our local grocer has read the bill and our Congress has not. So the Democrat members of Congress were taking a beating. And Nancy Pelosi, she says to them, well, they come whining, which happens with congressmen, they always come whining. Don't worry about those people. They're just people that Dick Armey sent in there. Well, I was home tending to a sick sheep, a sick goat. And so anyway, Nancy Pelosi made me famous. Now, of course, I was attacked then viciously from all quarters, but...
Well, here's the problem with you, Dick. You know what the problem is?
What?
You make too many enemies. It's okay to make enemies of Democrats like Pelosi, but there was a bill passed. I forget what the bill was, but DeLay was still in the Congress, and Hastert, I think, was now the Speaker. And I forget what you'll remember what the bill was. You wrote an op-ed piece against basically the bill or how they were passing it or
Medicare Part
something.
D.
Yeah. So what did they do to you?
Oh, they were furious. I was out of Congress at the time, but still I had work in Washington. Hassett called me up. That was the night they left the vote open for about 5 hours till about 3 in the morning while they twisted arms and made deals and got their votes. Well, first of all, that's bad form. It makes the House look silly. You can go into recess. But to leave the floor open, anyway, that was a dumb move on their part. Anyway, Hastert comes along and says, cussing me out, and he says, I had the votes before you wrote that editorial, and I got up that morning, and members were sitting all over the place reading your editorial, and I didn't have my votes. And you gave me the most miserable night of my life. And I said, well, frankly, you gave it to yourself. But I said, as long as you think that way, do you mind telling that story around town? And then he really got furious, and then I got cussed out some more. And he said he and Tom DeLay were going to destroy me in this town.
Yeah.
And they did research me and so forth, but they couldn't find any dirt. I mean, I had that guy that had that girly magazine investigate me.
Hustler.
Yeah.
Hustler,
So I survived
Hustler
that.
magazine is the one who got Bob Livingston
got
was trying
Bob
to take
Livingston.
over from Gingrich, was it?
I think, yeah.
And Livingston wanted to take
Busted
over,
him, yeah.
ran a power play. This is Republicans running a power play, and then Hustler, Larry Flint, came up with some stuff on him, and he dropped out. Is that how Hastert got in?
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Well,
they had.
you liked Hastert in the beginning.
At the beginning, until I saw that he was just simply going to be a handmaiden for the White House.
What happened later with Mr. Hastert once he got
Once
out of
he
Congress?
got out of Congress, he was convicted of violating a provision of law that he insisted on putting into the Patriot Act. So he got stuck on his own stick, but that was withdrawing cash without properly reporting it.
Okay, so when you left, you went to work for what used to be the Citizens for Sound Economy, then it became Freedom Works,
Right.
and then you were, would I call you a lobbyist working for Piper Rudnick?
Yeah, you
Okay,
could say
so you worked for
that.
Piper Rudnick, and you were doing issues with them,
Right.
and you were their resident expert on the issues
Right.
and that sort of thing. And then at some point, you wanted to do this, but their client was in opposition, so what happened then?
What, you mean Piper?
At Piper, yeah.
Oh, no. When Nancy Pelosi made me famous,
Uh-huh.
the Obama White House went after Piper Rudnick. And they called me up in August. I was home, and they were just laying the hammer on that firm. So I took a plane, got back in town, and I said, look, guys, they're never going to leave you alone until I leave your firm.
Right,
They wanted me to leave Freedom Works. I said,
Right.
that won't solve your problem.
right.
And I said, so the only thing for me to do is resign. That's the only thing that'll take the heat off your firm. Right. So I resigned.
Yeah.
And then I devoted all my time,
All your time
to Freedom Works.
creating problems for
Creating
people on
problems.
both sides of the
Yeah,
aisle,
right,
as a matter of fact. You also did a lot of television work, not just on our program over the years, but on, was it MSNBC where you were?
Yeah, right.
I mean, how did you get on MSNBC?
They
of all
wanted
things?
me because they needed a
The
conservative
token.
voice.
They wanted to be a token
You're right,
conservative.
right, yeah.
You were the token.
Right.
Yeah. How'd you do?
Well, I did all right for a couple of years, but
And then? And then what happened?
The only guy that would use me was there was only one fella, Chris
Matthews?
Chris Matthews.
Yeah.
But no, most of them wouldn't have me on their show.
Mm-hmm. Now you also went on there with a lady named Joan Walsh. as I
Oh, that was
recall.
awful.
So
That
tell us about the.
That was the dumbest and the meanest thing I ever did.
So
on
tell us
television.
about it.
Well, I don't know what got into me. I just looked at her without any history or background and made the most snide remark you can imagine. I said something like, I'm sure glad I'm married so I don't have to wake up in the morning and listen to you prattle. And it was a mean, stupid thing. And so, I mean, I took a lot of beef for it. People beat me up bad. I had it coming. I didn't have a problem with that. Some years later, I finally I said, I got to come to terms with this thing. I can't leave this. So I arranged to have a phone conversation with her, and I said, I just want to tell you I was wrong. She said, that sounds like apology. I'm not apologizing. I'm just telling you I was wrong, and I'm sorry I did it. But I'm not apologizing to you. Why aren't you? Because I said, I've seen conservatives and Republicans apologize, and Democrats and liberals, and you always raise it up as a prize, like taking coup. And I don't want to be ridiculed for trying to tell you that I acknowledge that I was wrong. And I thought I had made that point pretty clear. That evening, one of the MSNBC shows, that Madoff woman, she goes on the air and says, Joanne Walsh just got an apology from Dick Armey. So they were running the apology flag and celebrating themselves. But the fact of the matter is, Republicans have always been too well-mannered in dealing with Democrats, and Democrats are liberals, conservatives and liberals. Liberals have always been too profane and ugly in dealing with conservatives, and they've gotten away with it. And so one of the reasons why the conservative base in this country loves Trump is he's the only Republican that talks back.
Well, you've had some fun in your life, I'm happy to say, and one of the things is called riding a motorcycle.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God, Dick, we've got a picture of you on that motorcycle, and you've ridden motorcycles all the way to where?
Well, of course, my bike is the biggest bike on the road. It's a beautiful Honda Goldwing. I bought it in October of 15. I've put 125,000 miles on it. I've ridden it from Mexico to Canada when I was younger at 79. Then I rode it from here to Monterey, California and back when I was 80. And then when I was 81, I rode it from here to mile zero on A1A as a tribute to Jimmy Buffett. So those have been my three big road trips. But my favorite ride is to take it to the Smoky Mountains. So I ride. But I ride my bike 3 or 4 days a week, and I love that bike.
I know you do. Well, I want to talk in the last segment of this program about the future. I want to talk in particular about the election that just happened, and for those watching this program, this is November 12th of 2024. Election happened last Tuesday. Donald Trump was reelected president, other than Grover Cleveland's always been my favorite president because he's the other guy who got elected twice. And people say, why is Grover Cleveland your favorite president? You know why, Dick? You know why? He absolutely turned over 414 laws in his first term, vetoed them.
Oh.
I talked to George W. Bush about that when President Bush was president. I said, that's exactly 414 more than you vetoed in your first term. But anyway.
Well,
so
George W. Bush tried to catch up. He almost passed 414 laws that should have been turned over.
That's different, yeah. So a lot of people have troubles with Trump, including some of the people who supported him. First place, he seems to be hung up on people who are loyal to him. Is that good, bad, or indifferent from a politician's standpoint?
My loyalty is one of the most vicious tools. The Bushes used it well. You should be loyal to ideas and principles, and if you take an oath to the office, that's your loyalty. I'd had to tell both President Bushes that I never took an oath of loyalty to them. I took it to the Constitution. And personal loyalty, if it exists, it should be voluntary and cut both ways. But I think they make too much of that. Army's axiom is, if it's about you, you lose.
Do you think that the Constitution is in danger under Donald Trump,
No.
yes or no?
I think the Constitution was in danger under Obama and Biden. I don't
Yeah,
think
but they're Democrats, and so I'd say you're partisan. Why do you think it's Obama and Biden and not Donald Trump?
because Donald Trump doesn't have the same ambitions in life. Donald Trump truly believes, I mean, I know he's got his own personality afflictions, but he believes in this country. He honors the history of our nation. He respects the traditions of our country. He wants to make America what America has always been and more successful at it. Even though he's got his personal backslides. We all do. Now, the other guys, Obama said it best. We want to fundamentally change America. If you take a look at the left wing of American politics, they do not love this country. They despise this country. They don't understand the greatness of this nation. And the Constitution is just a nuisance to them.
All right, so in the Bill of Rights, which is very important, the First Amendment, obviously, rights of the press and individual freedom. You're not concerned about press freedom at this point under this administration?
No, well, sure. Under Biden?
Under any of these politics?
No. I think first of all, the press is totally sold out to the left. So what you're going to get is nonsense from them anyway. But no, I do not think that Trump is anywhere near as great a threat to the First Amendment of the Constitution as the Democrats have.
Okay. Then one of the things that he's calling for already, he says, I want the Senate Majority Leader, whoever's chosen, to say we're going to have recess appointments. So I don't want to wait and go through this process, of getting people appointed and then having to go through the Senate confirmation, et cetera. What do you think about that?
That's up to the Senate to protect itself. It's their prerogative. Every president wanted to have a greased skid to make his appointments with. But if the Senate's got any integrity as an institution, this is so important to me. Love the institution in which you're privileged to serve. Respect it, appreciate it, safeguard it, whether it's the House or the Senate.
Well, we're talking about the Senate, but let's talk about the House. I mean, the House Republicans, I think I can say this without being wrong, is that their speaker and all these other things, the leadership, I remember years ago, you used to say you didn't belong to an organized political party, you were a Republican. Well, I mean, the House of Representatives, Keystone Cops in the last year or two, what the heck?
Again, I think what's happened is since Newt left the speakership, the House leadership has increasingly basically been lapdog to the White House, particularly when there's been Republicans. Or they've had the notion that our leaders should go in and make a deal and bring it back. The principal purpose and function and responsibility of the Speaker is to protect the institution of the House of Representatives. Now, we've had a series of speakers, and the Republicans have been worse than the Democrats here, that have betrayed the tradition of the House. You got to remember the Founding Fathers treasured the House over the Senate. And they endowed the House with more responsibilities than the Senate. And we got to in fact, I'm working on an editorial right now that will outline what I believe to be the necessary responsibilities of the speakership, because the speakership has betrayed the House since Newt and with their goofy summitteering.
Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, Dick, and so I want you to just take your crystal ball and look in the future about what you see for America and what that viewer should be thinking about from their own perspective and how they can participate in or question or at least educate themselves enough to know what's going on. What would you suggest?
Well, I would suggest respect and restraint. The problem with, I understand the president respects, and he will have a lot of good people in it. but he doesn't respect enough, and he doesn't restrain himself enough. And the problem, I longed for that earlier when he first was in the White House. Is there nobody that can restrain this man from his excesses?
Right.
And he's got to learn to be more charitable to people who disagree with him, less self-centered, and more humble. We got a fighting chance for this nation to heal itself with responsible leadership if this president steps up to it.
Well, you and I have a friend in common, Steve Moore, who's also an economist.
Right.
Been on our program several times as well.
Mm-hmm.
He's one of Trump's advisors. I communicate with him from time to time, but the tariff situation is an example. I mean, you're a free trader. Steve Moore's a free trader, but they can't seem to get through.
Well, Trump sees it not as a policy, but as a strategy. And I can understand his point, but he risks a trade war. And I'm not so sure that it's a risk worth taking. But I think he's aware of one very important fact. Every nation in the world, every nation, including China, depends on the American dollar for the stability of their financial system. And so he's got some leverage, and he may be able to make it work.
Well, let's just hope that's the case. And the government debt, it's another program we did last year.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that can be solved. But I tell you this, we appreciate your being here on this program. The other two programs, watch them online, part 1 and part 2. And then look at Perspectives Matter. Follow us on social media, which there's an awful lot, as you know. YouTube is an example, because we're talking about perspectives that really matter with people who really care.